Thanks for tuning into The Voice of Adventure. Today we will be exploring Journey of the Chief Part 5, the Barren Island, where we will follow our last adventure with Akatu as he searches for Pyrrhus' temple. Now let's hop into the story. Akatu stood by the altar waiting. Hello? Water lady? How do I get out of here? The water lady had left Akatu all alone with no means of escape. He could try jumping into the water and swimming to the surface, but how far down was he? Could he hold his breath until he reached the surface? As he paced around the altar, suddenly a hole opened up in the ceiling, and water near his feet started streaming up. That's right, up. Somehow the water around the altar was being sucked straight up into the hole. Thinking this might be his only chance, Akatu jumped into the water. The current pulled him quickly out of the cave and shot him up, breaking through the surface of the water in mere moments and flinging him several feet into the air. The night sky and cool air greeted him as he splashed back into the ocean. Thousands of stars littered the sky, and a full moon gleamed above him, reflecting quietly off the gentle waves. Free from the cave, he realized his next problem. His raft was destroyed by the whirlpool, and he was nowhere near land. How could he navigate the sea? Then he noticed a small boat floating nearby. Akatu swam aboard and found it was fully stocked with everything he needed. There was plenty of food and water, blankets for the cold nights at sea, and even a strong sail. Akatu was overjoyed, and without thinking, he thanked the one above for providing this boat. As he began to set sail, Akatu realized how strange it was that he thanked the one above. He had been hearing about him in the last 3 temples, but Akatu felt like he still barely knew him, so to openly thank him seemed strange. Akatu sailed for several days, which gave him plenty of time to reflect on the other strange things that had happened on his journey thus far. He recalled being in the cave near the peak of the mountain, looking for the first temple. The cave continued deep into the mountain, but it was too dark to see anything. Then out of nowhere, a stick fell so that he could make a torch. Where had it come from? Was it stuck in the ceiling? If so, why did it fall right when he needed it? It was also the perfect size and length to make a torch. Did someone put it there knowing when Akatu would need it? Then Akatu remembered his journey through the desert. He had lost all his water in a sandstorm and had no chance of finding more. Then, out of nowhere, a random man walked up and offered him water. Where had he come from? Akatu had seen no signs of life on his journey so far. Was there a hidden village near that desert? But how did the man have perfect timing? He came right when Akatu was giving up and provided both water and information. Without both of these things, Akatu would have perished in the desert. Then there were the most recent events. Akatu crafted a raft to sail the ocean, but had no sail. Then, by some miracle, he found a few old boats with the sail in great condition while the boats themselves were falling apart. How could that happen? The wood on the boats was rotting, yet the sail was still usable? It doesn't make sense. There was also the boat he was on now. His raft was taken by the whirlpool and lost, but when he left the temple, this one was waiting for him. No one could have left it here, right? Also, how did the water flow upwards in the temple? Shouldn't that be impossible? Looking back on all these events, Akatu realized that he always received exactly what he needed when he needed it. The torch to explore the caves, the water to traverse the desert, the sail to navigate the ocean. Now this boat to sail to the final temple. These didn't feel like random events anymore. They were timed too perfectly, like someone had planned them out. Was this the one above's doing? Was he the one who helped Akatu through all the trials? Had he been here the whole time? Akatu remembered what he heard in Aquela's temple. He sees your beginning, your trials, and your ending at the same time. He has laid out plans to make you into the best version of yourself. That confirms it, right? Akatu thought. The one above did help me through this journey. Even with this realization, Akatu didn't feel certain. Part of him wanted to believe that the one above was with him, but something deep within stopped him. It was like a wall Akatu couldn't scale. blocking him from completely trusting in the one above. A few more days went by, and Akatu spent the time looking within. What could this wall be? Every time he saw the face of his friend Amik, who was taken in the trials, but Akatu brushed it off, not wanting to remember the pain of losing him. Why is your face constantly on my mind, Amik? Pain and betrayal flooded in. Tears formed in his eyes. Akatu hurt remembering how his best friend was taken from him. How, despite having no desire, Amik was forced to be a chief candidate. How could a god be okay with this? How could he choose him when he knew he wouldn't make it? Why would they make the children and their parents suffer like that? Akatu realized this was his wall. Because of Amik's death, Akatu felt betrayed by the gods or the one above. He wasn't sure which. He felt like they unjustly took Amik and the other children. How could he trust a god who lets this pain happen? How could he believe in them when they take lives away with no reason? He fell face down on his boat sobbing. Akatu cursed at the sky, not knowing if the one above was to blame. He shouted and uncapped all of his anger, frustration, and grief he had kept bottled up inside. Maybe the one above is the god to blame, Akatu thought while his tears stained the floor of the boat. He felt torn. But he's been the one providing for me this whole journey. Would a god like that have planned the deaths of those children? All of a sudden, Akatu heard an angelic voice coming from all around him. Akatu! He jerked up, wiping his tears, and looked around, but no one was there. Oh great, now I'm hallucinating, he thought. Akatu sat back down, his eyes red and swollen from his crying. But then it came again. Akatu! He looked everywhere and saw no one. Akatu called out, Who's there? There was a long pause. Then the voice came again. Akatu! At this point, Akatu felt like he was going crazy. He heard the voice from every direction, but no one was there. His mind must be playing tricks on him. He sat there, closed his eyes, and let his tears flow again. Then the voice came again. Akatu, my son, what is troubling you? Accepting that he was crazy, Akatu responded. My friend was taken from me. My village has lost so many kids to these trials, and I'm supposed to trust in a god who let it all happen. What if it was all part of the god's plan, to take your village where it needed to go? Why would this level of pain and suffering be needed to guide the village? Shouldn't the god gently guide them? Taking away what they care about will only make them resent the god. Just like me, they will start refusing to believe because of what the god allowed to happen. Sometimes pain is the only way for people to open themselves up. How can pain open someone up? If anything, it would close them off, isolate them. Akatu felt insane talking to this voice. Pain forces them to look within themselves for answers. And when they can't find the answers, they come to me. To you? Isn't this just a voice in my imagination? Akatu thought. How can anyone come to an imaginary voice? Am I really going totally insane? Who are you? He asked the voice. I am the one who brought everything to be. I am the one who is with my people. I am the one who sees all. The one above? Akatu didn't know if he could believe this voice. He still thought he was going crazy in imagining this whole conversation. Could it actually be the one above? Is this his voice? Yes, my son, I am him. Akatu sat there dumbfounded. The voice had responded to his thoughts, not just his words, but his thoughts. Unless Akatu was truly insane, this voice was from the one above. Akatu didn't know what to say. On one hand, he thought he was crazy, but on the other, he hoped it was true. The voice continued. Akatu, I know you feel like you're going crazy, but I have big plans for you. I need you to bring truth to your village. Akatu sat there for a few minutes thinking, what truth? He kept thinking he didn't have a truth to bring. He felt like there was nothing he would be able to share with his village. Would they even listen if he had something to share? He had ostracized himself from the village by not believing in their gods. Why would they listen to him? I don't have a truth I can share. I'm sorry, but you have the wrong person. No, just as I have planned everything. I have prepared you to share the truth with them. More of Akatu's bottled up emotions came flowing out as he spoke. Prepared me? How have you prepared me? I lost my best friend to these stupid trials. I am basically ostracized in my village because I don't believe in their gods. I don't even know what you want me to share. Akatu raised his voice as he spoke, screaming the last sentence out, tears streaming down his face. Silence hung in the air. See, you have no response, Akatu thought. For a second he was proud that the one above was speechless. But as the silence grew longer, Akatu wanted nothing more than to hear him speak again. He sat there, tears still falling off his face, when he heard the one above again. I know this is difficult to understand, but everything that's happened to you brought you to this moment. Amik had to die so you would deny your village gods. That opened your heart to other possibilities. You did not come to the temples with your preconceived beliefs of what the gods should be like. Instead, you came empty, looking for something to fill that hole inside your heart. This is your truth to share. Your whole village has the same hole they are trying to fill, but only I can fill that hole. Akatu sat there stunned. It felt like the painful pieces of his life started falling into place. It still hurt, but there were now glimpses of purpose behind all his pain. Almost dying during the trials had opened him up to rely on the one above. Although he didn't know how to share these feelings with his village, he finally started understanding why he went through all that pain. Amik had died for the truth to be shared. He had to make it back to his village, not only for the other candidates like Vargon and Samota, but also for Amik. Akatu could not let his death be in vain. All he needed was his final tattoo, and he would have the village's ear. Hopefully. He looked up to the sky and said, Thank you. I see now how you've laid the path out for me. As Akatu prepared his boat, a few tears still running down his face, he felt like the voice was smiling. Akatu sailed with confidence. The mission from the one above brought a sense of clarity and purpose to Akatu. He had no idea where the island was, but knew the one above would guide him there. Hours turned to days and days to weeks, yet his supplies had not run out. But the endless weeks weighed on Akatu. The sounds of the ocean and the vastness of the horizon brought doubts. Maybe it wasn't the one above. Maybe I was, in fact, going crazy, Akatu thought to himself. Then finally, after a few more days, Akatu saw a smoking island in the distance. As he approached, he could see there were no signs of life on the island. No trees, no plants, nothing green. It was barren. The ground was black with rivers of a glowing red liquid. One large mountain stood in the middle of the island, smoke rising from the peak. Sections of the coast spewed white smoke where the red rivers touched the water. Surely this is not the right place, he thought. Why would the last temple be in a place like this? As the boat continued closer, he felt a growing urge to explore the island. It was as if the island itself was pulling him in. Akatu looked up at the clouds, hoping to hear from the one above, but there was no voice, just more silence as it's been for the last few weeks. He only had the words from a few weeks ago. I have planned everything. I have prepared you. Were those even the one above's words? He hadn't heard anything after that. Could Akatu have imagined it? These worries were piling up on Akatu's mind, weighing down his spirit and drive. His boat kept inching closer to the island. If he wanted to turn back, it had to be now. Akatu let the boat continue. His curiosity about the island outweighed his doubt. If the island is going to pull me in, I have to find out why, Akatu thought. He landed and immediately felt the heat emanating from the ground. Within seconds, Akatu was dripping with sweat. His clothes began sticking to his skin as the fabric absorbed the moisture. He grabbed all his available water, knowing that his curiosity was going to give him a workout. There was truly nothing here. His exploration had found that the ground was too hard for plants to grow, and the heat would kill them in seconds. The red rivers brought heat to every corner of the island, not giving the land time to cool. The heat from the land mixed with the moisture of the ocean, making it feel thick. Each step was like walking through a sauna. Akatu struggled but continued further into the island. He was walking aimlessly. Chief Burza had told him the temple was in the middle of the fire. But what fire? The land was extremely hot, but there was nothing to burn. It was barren. Was it even the correct island? Suddenly the ground rumbled. Akatu fell to his knees as the island shook beneath him. He looked up at the mountain and saw smoke billowing out of the peak. A bit of red liquid spewed forth, surging through the rivers. Slowly, the shaking stopped. His fascination turned to fear by what just happened. He wanted to just run away and leave the island behind. Everything about this place screamed danger. But something kept him there. Was it the pool of the island again? After a few deep breaths, Akatu continued. He decided to walk towards the mountain as there was nothing else here. Surely if the temple was here, it would be near the mountain. He walked for hours, then felt the ground shake again. It felt more violent this time, as if the mountain was getting ready to explode. Once Akatu steadied himself, he continued, not letting his fear stop him. He had walked this far into the island, too late to turn back now. After a few more grueling hours, Akatu arrived at the base of the mountain. Getting this close showed the magnitude of the mountain. It might have been only half the size of the one he climbed to reach Tyrander's temple, but even still, it was massive, casting a shadow over half the island. Akatu looked around, hoping to find a path, tunnel, or even a sign pointing to the temple. But there was nothing. Just the steep slopes leading up to the mountain. Knowing it would take all day to walk around the base of the mountain, Akatu set off to a nearby ridge for a better view. It's not far. Maybe I'll see something from the top, Akatu thought. Turns out it was farther than Akatu had anticipated. He trudged on, stopping often to catch his breath. But when he made it to the top of the ridge, what a view. It was still a barren island, but the contrast of the land and the sea made each one pop in an interesting way. The awe-inspiring beauty of it enveloped him. Akatu lost track of time standing there. The sun started casting yellow and orange light over the island before Akatu realized how much time had passed. Oh no, he thought. With the sun down, it would be almost impossible to see an entrance. He looked back at the mountain, praying that in these last seconds of light he would find the entrance. Akatu quickly scanned the mountain, looking for any hint of a temple. He strained his eyes, but with the fading light, all he could see were the streams of red liquid coming from the top of the mountain. Akatu was about to give up when he noticed something odd. There was one red river that didn't come from the top of the mountain. It came directly out of the side of the mountain. This was the only one that did that. It had to be special, right? With no other options, Akatu started running down the ridge, using the last bits of light to find a path down. As the sun completely set over the horizon, Akatu came to a stop, panting next to the river. The river's dim red glow lit up a tunnel in the mountain. The tunnel looked smooth, as if someone had carved it out. The air was thick and humid. As he kept walking, the temperature slowly rose higher and higher the farther he went into the mountain. Beads of sweat ran down his skin, and he had to constantly stop to rest. But finally, Akatu stepped out of the tunnel into a large open cave. The room was vaguely circular. A large pool of glowing molten liquid bubbled in the middle. Akatu could barely see the ceiling and the rock spikes hanging from it. On the opposite wall, the viscous goo poured from above, congregating into a pool in front of him. Positioned in the center of the pool sat the altar Akatu had come for. This was the right place. He was finally here. After so many weeks, months, Akatu didn't know anymore. But here he was at the final altar. He walked up to the red pool, ready to finally complete his quest. He had definitely doubted himself at the beginning, but after all this time, his tattoo would be complete and he could return to his village. In excitement, without thinking, Akatu was about to step directly into the red liquid, but at the last second he remembered the scorching heat radiating from it. Quickly bringing his foot back, Akatu bent down to inspect the liquid fire when a few drops of sweat fell off his face and landed in the pool. They evaporated instantly. Akatu jumped back, falling over, shocked and a bit scared now. If his sweat disappeared instantly, what would have happened if he had stepped into it? He would have been heavily burned, or worse, he could have fallen in and died. Fear took hold of Akatu. His breathing became quick and ragged. His eyes were wide with fear of what could have happened. He sat there, unmoving. All of a sudden, he heard a voice. Akatu. It shook him back to reality. He felt a wave of peace flow through him, washing away the fear. Akatu looked at the danger before him, but now the fear was contained. He knew that stepping into the bubbling red liquid would be the end of him, but Akatu felt confident that he could find a way to reach the altar. He looked around the pool and saw small rocks protruding from the surface, creating stepping stones to the altar. They were too far to simply step from one to the next. It would be dangerous, but it was the only viable option he had at the moment. Akatu positioned himself and took a few deep breaths. He felt peace and confidence flow through him, and he leapt to the first stone. It was barely big enough for his feet to sit side by side, but somehow he managed to land and not fall into the searing ooze. Akatu leapt again and again, and every time he landed onto the next rock. The altar was so close now. He only had a few more jumps left. In his haste to make it to the goal, Akatu jumped again without steadying himself first. Akatu's foot barely made it, and he was thrown off balance. To prevent himself from falling, Akatu quickly jumped again. His foot barely reached the next stone, but the double jump had given him too much forward momentum. As his foot landed, the rest of him started to fall forward. Instinctively, he pushed off the last stone and dove headfirst towards the altar. Akatu closed his eyes, too scared to watch as he fell. He was waiting for the searing pain of falling into the burning pool, but instead, he landed hard on the stone, landing next to the altar. Akatu pushed himself to stand, aching from the hard landing. He looked back over the rocks he had just traversed, amazed he actually made it. He paused and took a few deep breaths, then placed his hand on the altar. A small circle started bubbling behind the altar. It kept bubbling more and more aggressively until suddenly a man sprang forth. His skin was dry and crackled and resembled a piece of charcoal. His hair was bright red like the pool. His eyes flashed open, and Akatu stepped back as the piercing red eyes gazed at him. The red liquid ran from his head, filling in all the cracks of his body. Akatu immediately felt intimidated. The man looked like the island itself, and his presence filled the room. "What do we have here? A visitor? We don't get many of those." As he spoke, he lost his intimidating presence. His voice was calm and peaceful. Akatu felt relaxed. His tension, doubts, and pain melted away. "I am Akatu. The one above has sent me here to get the last piece of my tattoo and return to my village." "Well, your journey is almost complete then. The one above has brought you far, but there's still farther to go. You've been learning about the one above at each temple, right?" "Yes, each temple has taught me a different part about him." "So what have you learned so far?" "I learned that the one above created everything, that he is always with us and for us, that he has a plan for us, And that he specifically planned my past with my future in mind. All true and wonderful things. The island man took a deep breath before continuing. Now I should teach you something as well. But what I'm about to say is not an easy subject. You may already understand this to an extent, but it's important to fully understand. Akatu stood there ready to hear what the man had to say, though he was slightly confused. Was the subject difficult to understand? Was it something he wouldn't like, and he might only understand it a bit? Sometimes the one above gives you silence instead of an answer. Akatu felt confused. Based on what he had learned before, this felt different. Each other temple talked about how he is with you in life, but the one above planned everything out. Why would he give silence? Akatu stood there for a while thinking about all this. He saw how the one above was silent through most of his journey. Akatu figured it was because he didn't know enough about the one above, or that Akatu wasn't seeking him. But the one above chose to be silent on purpose? How was that supposed to help Akatu trust him? The island man spoke again, breaking the silence. I see you're having trouble completely understanding my statement. Akatu nodded. I'll give you an example. As you saw, this island is barren. There is not even a hint of life here. This is what being given silence feels like. The island man looked at Akatu, and Akatu nodded in agreement. You are asking for the answer, but the world flows through your barren land, making it impossible for anything to take root. Yet, the one above has plans for you to prosper. You see, the surface looks too burdened and scars to allow growth, but it's not about what's on the surface. The island man grinned, excited for this next part. The fire below the mountain is starting to cool. It has done its part, giving the land what it needed. Akatu interrupted. What did the island need? Minerals. Through the burning rivers, minerals and resources have been spread all throughout this island. Once the land cools, there will be plenty of resources to support life. And this is what the one above does with his silence. Although it feels like the world is burning all your efforts, it's actually giving you everything you need in order to fulfill the plan the one above has for you. The island man paused, letting the statement sink in. Even now, he is using what is destroying the island to make it greater. Akatu felt like he was starting to understand. Just like how Akatu struggled through the trials, it was all in order to make him stronger. Looking at the island man, Akatu could tell that this was the end of the conversation. He was about to receive his tattoo and be on his way. Akatu sighed, knowing that all of his questions would not be answered today. Sadly, this is all the time we have. I'm sure you have hundreds of questions. Just know that the one above will reveal the answers to your questions. The island man gave a big smile. You just have to ask and wait. Please stretch out your left hand. Akatu did so, ready for the burning sensation. In the name of the one above, I bestow on you the mark of fire, our source of life. The burning sensation flowed up Akatu's arm and settled into his tattoo. Before long, the pain subsided. Akatu looked at his arm and saw a large flame finishing up his tattoo. Without saying a word, the island man jumped back into the burning water and disappeared, leaving Akatu alone. He looked at his tattoo and started laughing before shouting, It's finally complete! After all this time, Akatu had finished his journey. He found all the temples. He survived all the trials. But more than that, he learned the truth. Akatu now carried the one above with him, filling the hole inside him. Akatu made it out of the cave as the sun was rising. He looked out over the barren island, knowing that one day this island would be full of life. With the one above by his side, Akatu was excited to start his new adventure. Akatu quickly made his way to his boat, ready to share the truth with his village. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Adventure. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also keep up with the stories and see behind-the-scenes content on Instagram @JosiahTheAuthor. Join me as we continue these adventures.